We're going to do factoring. So we have three terms here, or a little trinomial, you could say, and we need to go through the factoring of it. Now, the reason this is looking a little more difficult is because maybe when you're factoring, you're used to doing quadratics, and then this has a y attached to the second and third term here, so it gets a little confusing. But the method is still the exact same here. What we do, okay, is we can do that product and sum where they tell you to multiply two terms that multiply to your a times your c. The only thing they don't tend to do with a times c is they normally just give you the coefficients. That would be 1 and -5. But really, we could think of it as what's going to multiply to this whole value here. Okay, so think of that whole value, that x squared. So that we're going to call that, even though the a is usually just a coefficient, we're going to say this is x squared times, and our c term, including the variable, is -5. I want to do this in green. -5y squared. So what does that mean? Well, how do I multiply to get those two terms? So I need two numbers that multiply to -5x squared y squared. This is confusing. And the reason that they normally don't do this and they only get you to look at the coefficient is because it's confusing. It's tough to look at those two values. But those two numbers are actually going to be important to us. The best way to break it up is think of it like this. I need to multiply to x squared and y squared. Well, x squared is an x times an x, and a y squared is a y times a y. So whatever numbers we use for the coefficients, the variables are going to be an x here and a y here and an x here and a y here. And we're really just looking for the coefficient. Okay? Now I know I've complicated this. Really, we could have just looked at 1 times -5, and we're looking for a number -5. So let's kind of keep that in mind. Even though I put those x, y's there, let's keep that in mind that the easy version of this is just two numbers that multiply to -5. But we're not all done. The same two numbers also have to add to our b term. And again, the b term is usually the coefficient in the middle here, so that's our b term, which is 4, but technically there's an x and a y attached to them. And that's where this becomes important, right? That x and the y's, because we actually need to add to what those variables are. So again, think of it like whatever coefficients we use, there's actually going to be an x and a y attached to them, the same way we kind of deduced them there. The easy version of this is we're just looking for two coefficients that add to 4. Okay? And they don't usually, like I said before, they don't usually write in the variables because they get a little confusing to look at, right? It's easier just to focus on the coefficient. So let's do that. Let's focus on the coefficient. Two numbers that multiply to -5 and add to 4. The only factors of -5 or 5 are 1 and 5, and one of them needs to be negative. So my two numbers are going to be 1 and 5, and one of these needs to be negative to make it to 4. Well, if the 1 is negative, -1 and 5 is 4, and -1 times 5 is -5. But remember I told you, well, there's supposed to be an x and a y and an x and a y. We just never really ever talk about this stuff. The reason they're supposed to be there is because when we go to decompose this, we're going to decompose this middle term. Okay, the x squared stays. And technically, it's -1 xy and +5 xy. When you normally do it, it's just the x value. So usually you think, oh, because there's an x, I add an x, but they're actually part of what we did here. And then finally, the very last term there was our -5y squared. Well, now what we do is we're going to do some common factoring. So I'm going to look for a common factor in the first two terms and a common factor in the second two terms. What comes out of the first two terms? Well, I can take an x out. There's definitely an x in both of these. So if I factor out x, okay, think of it like we divide the first term by x and this term by x. X squared divided by x is just an x. Okay. And -1 xy divided by x, well, the x's kind of cancel out, and we're left with -1y or just -y Actually, I'm going to write that in red because the colors are getting confusing. Okay. And then in the second set of values here, what comes out of both of those? Well, I can take 5y out of both of those. So think of it like we can divide by, use green here. I can divide both of these by 5y. So positive 5y comes out, and what's left in the brackets? Well, the 5's cancel out, the y's cancel out. We're left with an x. Here, it's negative 5 divided by 5, so it's minus. And y squared divided by y is just a y. And you'll notice, put these back in black, the two brackets are the same. So what's actually happening here? Well, here, they're common factoring out the brackets. What do I mean by that? I'm going to show you here on the side. Think of it like I use a let statement. Let x minus y equal a. This equation would then read x times a plus 5y times a. Well, what's the common here? A is. I can common factor out a, and I'd be left with x plus 5y. Right? But my a isn't really a, it's x minus y, so I resubstitute in, and I get x minus y times x plus 5y. And that's what they've told you to do here. They say put those two brackets really as one, x minus y, and then whatever is left over, that's this stuff, goes in the other bracket, x plus 5y. So this is what they teach you as the shortcut. Here's what's actually happening to get the exact same answer. This is technically factored. Okay. Now I did a super complicated version that they don't normally teach all of that. Let's go back. Let's do that original one again and do it the way that your teachers usually teach you without the complicated stuff. So f at x is equal to, we'll still use the same values, x squared plus 4xy minus 5y squared. Okay. Well, normally, a fast way of doing this is because this coefficient is a 1 here, you can literally just do the product sum stuff. You can just do two numbers that multiply to c. c is negative 5. Okay? And they add to the b value, which is positive 4. Yeah, we've already gone through this process. It's negative 1 and 5. And because this is an a value, what we do here is the negative 1 goes into one bracket, and the positive 5 goes into the other bracket, and x goes into both of these. The only additional thing we have to do because of this question is because there's a y squared at the end, we technically have to attach a y to the negative 1 and the 5. And if we do that, lo and behold, see, look, I just did that really all in one step using this stuff. This answer is the exact same answer we did here. Okay. There's an x to start, a negative 1y, I just didn't write the 1 in here, and a positive 5y. But I did every single step above here. I just used a bunch of the shortcuts that are normally taught. This is what's really happening. This is what you kind of need to know. It's good to know the other stuff, but it's way faster to just do it the shortcut way.